Good morning, Canada. A very lovely afternoon, Finland. It's my pleasure and joy to welcome you to a wonderful session today at the World Circular Economy Forum. It's an acceleration session where we focus on the opportunities and challenges of a data-based circular economy. We will be touching upon ICT, that's Information Communications Technologies, and traceability. My name is Sami Kazi. I'll be your moderator and host today. I work at VTT, the Technical Research Centre of Finland, as a research team leader. One of my passions, and that of course of my organization, is looking into innovation ecosystems and using these innovation ecosystems to address challenges of global significance and then to offer opportunities and what we like to say exponential hope to society where we are having challenges. And I'd like to perhaps set the scene and talk about our planet. This is one of the main reasons we are here today. And is it my planet, or is it your planet? Or at the other end, is it our planet? And if we talk about it just being my planet or your planet, there are only certain incremental things which we can do. But the moment we actually go for our planet, there is so much what we can do. And I'd like to just make a simple statement that, we cannot influence what we have inherited from previous generations. But at the same time, we are in an opportunistic place to perhaps not just improve our lives, but leave a world behind for future generations, our children, our grandchildren, and the generations which will follow thereafter. If you look at how technology and innovative solutions are evolving, there is limited lack of technology. The technology is over there. We just need to pool in multiple disciplines and everything and actually make magic happen. And this is one of the things which our organization does, VTT. We bring this exponential hope in everything and prepare for the future. And I'd like to say that the future is in our hands. And let's make some good value about it. Let me start off by giving you a very short and brief insight into what this session will be about. We will look at the role of ICT, that's Information Communications Technologies, as a basis for a transition to a circular economy. And we will actually look into, is ICT an opportunity or is it actually a challenge? Because naturally, the moment we start dealing with data, we have lots of energy consumption and it brings about certain challenges. But at the same time, we will also look at what could be different opportunities from policy perspectives, from governance perspectives, you name it. And then we will also be looking at traceability. Again, a very trending topic, word, and beyond that, because traceability is one of the things which is at the core of the circular economy. And let's remember that the moment we talk about circularity of the circular economy, it's not just recycling. It's making sure that everything stays within the loop, even if it's repurposed, it goes into a different product or something else. We need to make sure we keep our planet and everything intact. And we will look at some of these, let's say, examples. Furthermore, it's also great that we will have a wonderful panel discussion. We have representatives from policy, from industry, from funding, and also research, sharing their insights, views, and some of the great work which they have done on the circular economy, traceability, and of course, digitalization. What is there at the crossroads and how, let's say, we can make sense of it. But without further ado, I'd like to invite our first keynote speaker today. So we have two keynotes. It's my pleasure to bring on board Dr. Nani Pajunen, who's a leading specialist at the Sitra Fund in Finland. She works on sustainability solutions and a great person to actually talk about the circular economy, solutions in the built environment, education, research, but most importantly, Nina, you also know how to bring these things to make sure we have profitable business. Nina, floor is yours.
So, hello world. Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Maybe some of you are now in a night time. It's my pleasure to be here today, and I'm so happy that we can collaborate with you today. Like Sami said, I'm starting with a big picture. I love to talk about big picture, education, research, and solutions. Because when I see a challenge somewhere, I see also a solution. We need to find solutions if we are facing these big challenges like we do today. Like Sami said, we have biodiversity loss, we have climate change. And global world economy, it's based on overusing natural resources. So we really need to find solutions together. So what does it mean from the big picture perspective? It's planet Earth. We have different kind of sectors in a society, and we need to make changes in all of those sectors. We need to make changes from the strategy level and operational level. We need to make changes in businesses, in public sector, and in our lives, our everyday life. So what does it mean? For example, in the built environment, when we plan cities or places where we are living, housing, we have education there, we have work there. So how we plan these areas so that we can take these carbon neutral circular economy solutions use in businesses and in our everyday life. So when we talk about smart cities, we need to understand that we need raw materials and energy. When we produce devices like smartphones, mobile phones, computers, energy system, so we need to make changes in the beginning of the life cycle. Before we do anything, we need to rethink. So today, we are talking more about ICT sector. And as we know, all of the actions we have here on the planet Earth, there is also environmental footprint. Also, ICT have environmental impacts. There are really many good things via digitalisation, data, we are using already today. We can order food, or we can have these kind of huge conferences. More than 7,000 people are here, part of this big network, these few days here, and solving these huge challenges we are facing. We can have meetings via Zoom, we can monitor environment, we know where we use energy and where we can decrease energy, and so on. Many, many things. But what we don't know is the wholeness of the environmental impacts of this ICT, digitalization, and data. We don't know how much energy we are going to use in the future if we are creating and building more and more applications or data centers or whatever. And at the moment, we are using more and more raw materials in energy system, in those devices, mobile phones, computers, smartwatches, and so on. And we are using same raw materials, valuable raw materials, like we need to have in windmills, solar panels, TVs, and these all devices we need in ICT sector. So we need to know more about these environmental impacts. And maybe today is the day that we make the first decisions. How can we together create a sustainable future? We can't do anymore everything we can. Maybe we need to focus more on those decisions that we together create a sustainable future. What do we really need for good life? For good life for all of us worldwide, not only here or Canada or wherever you are. And we are talking about global networks. What kind of changes we need to make in every part of these global networks, and in public, private sector, and in our everyday life. We know that we have already quite good solutions. We just have to make decisions to make this really happen, this sustainable future. So what does it mean? It means that maybe we need to rethink. Do we need so much everything we are having at the moment? Do we need so much devices? Do we need to use so much energy? And what can we do? We need to develop materials so that we are sure that in the end of life we can recycle those materials. We need to design products so that those are long-lasting, and in the end of life we can reuse or recycle the materials. And of course, products should be that kind of that we can also repair those and change components there. And we need to think that all of the applications and solutions help us to make this sustainable future really happen. We really have many, many experts, but we have many more. That's why I want to also say education and research is always in my heart. And we need to help those people who hasn't found their role in this work to make transition towards carbon neutral circular economy. We need to have education. For example, here in Finland, we have created circular economy courses in every level of the Finnish school system during the years 2017 and 2019. And we are happy to tell more about this and tell experience what we have learned from those. And as an individual, we can ask, do we need so much? And as a professional, we can demand from the market more sustainable solutions. And of course, as an individual, we can also demand more sustainable products. And at the same time, market should produce more sustainable solutions. So we are all together here. We can't make these decisions and actions only by ourselves, but together. So today we are going to continue with this and great panel and panelists. I'm really happy that you can continue from here. Are we part of the solution or are we still part of the problem? I see that the all is in our hands and we had to make decisions today, not tomorrow. Today, and we are so happy that all of you, audience, the world, are with us here today. And let's do this happen and let's make this really happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Nani. Don't disappear yet. You touched on some, very important issues, and you were saying you feel certain things in your heart and stuff,
Yeah.
and one thing which I'm very passionate about myself is education.
Yeah.
So can you perhaps, enlighten us a bit on how do you see the way forward? What can we do in our education curricula or systems to actually help this transition towards a circular economy?
Yeah. First, we need to understand that this is circular economy. It's not one subject that we can teach,
Exactly.
but we need to see the wholeness. We need to have circular economy in businesses, in engineering, in construction, in ICT. So we need to understand what does it mean to make changes in these sectors. And that's why we need also education from all of these perspectives. So we need to integrate circular economy in the education, not start new kind of courses, which is like telling everything.
Yeah.
And this is really a big change in market economy. But at the same time, we need to understand in engineering and in material development, product design, there are so huge possibilities there at the moment.
Yeah, and I think this basically ties in, with the thing that we cannot just look at things as individuals. We need to combine them together because that is where the whole happens. We get catalysts coming in and we actually have magic happening.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
Thank
Nani
you.
will bring you on board again in a while.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you once again very much to Nani. And by the way, for all of you wonderful participants out there, if you have any questions at any time, please just type them into the chat. We will pick up on these later on. So if you will have any questions for the panelists in general, or then for Nani and my colleague INCA who will be up on stage, please do send them in through. And now for our second keynote, it's my pleasure to bring on board my wonderful colleague from VTT, INCA Orko. She's a co-creation manager over there, and today she's going to be talking about traceability in the circular economy. And one of the things I know that INCA is super passionate about is co-developing disruptive concepts that optimize the environmental, socio-technical, and everything, and actually bring value to cities and people and this planet we work on. INCA, floor is yours.
Great, thanks Sami for the upbeat intro, and thank you also to Nani for the inspirational talk. So my talk is going to go a little bit deeper, one opportunity out of digitalization. And as you take a look at the right-hand side of my content slide, you can see that there are multiple pictures there. And what I'm trying to say with these pictures is that traceability has really many faces, and it depends a lot on the sector of industry that we are working with, and it depends on the general context what we need for traceability. I'm not going to go deep down into, you can probably pick out some analog and then also some digital opportunities to take traceability forward. But the key one thing that's common with anything we want to do, you can see in the middle. So we need people working together, and we need organizations working together, just as we heard from Nani just now. On the right-hand side corner, though, I want to point out, unless you get the meaning of the picture, there's a block and there's a chain, and the picture has been taken underneath a bridge in Montreal. So, hi all Canadians. I'm going to talk a little bit about what traceability for sustainability is, what data we need, and also what are the steps forward. So what do we mean by traceability? This is a literature reference that defines traceability for sustainability as connecting certain information items in the value chain to provide visibility for the stakeholders. Why do we talk about traceability? Well, here we see an example of the electric car value chain. In today's world, it's not enough that we just figure out what to do with the materials at the end of the life, as you can see the red circle there. We also need to understand that independent of where we operate within this value chain, it's to our benefit that we understand the benefits of the full life cycle of our materials and components, and that this will help us manage both our supply chain, but then of course we are also hoping that it will help us make informed decisions in the product design, and also eventually design new business models and apply them. So traceability is a vehicle to organize this information and take us further. The elements of traceability include awareness and knowledge. So the benefits of the traceability systems need to be understood. There can be regulatory compliance issues, but also we can build up corporate value through awareness and knowledge, a clear understanding of the purpose of the traceability system. This is what we need. Communications come in here, so we need that to transform the awareness into understanding. We also need to take a look at the system as a whole so that we can focus our sustainability hotspots and actions and work on the things where we can have the most impact. We also need commitment and engagement. So we need everybody along the value chain to participate, and here is where policies come in handy, regulation may come in handy. We may also need some carrots in the form of funding. Then also the implementation needs structures. So for that, there are already many material passport initiatives. This is one way to bring the implementation under a structure. And then we also may need norms and standards, because those may be required for us to be able to understand what type of information we are collecting and how we are validating that information and how we're going to package that information. We will also need some appropriate technologies, including data spaces and also platforms. And we have to reach a common understanding where to collect the data, who is going to manage the data, and so forth. And we also have to make sure that we are inclusive enough so that everybody that we need in the value chain will have the opportunity to participate, whether they are SMEs or startups. So about the data. What data do we need for our traceability? So traceability is not new. Already since 20 years, we've had some legislation in the EU about product safety, and that has required us to report the manufacturer and also report some product-related information. We are now expanding on that, so there's tons of data that we might collect, And here's one example of the traceability data. As you can see, there's one bullet point also in each of the categories regarding sustainability. Here are some of the sustainability-related traceability data that we can see. These have been suggested, and as you can see, there's tons of things we can see there. There's no way we can just, if we want to take a mouthful, to chew up on everything here. So we really need to focus on what is relevant when we are creating our traceability program. We need to focus on the ones that have the most impact in our business and in our case. I mentioned earlier about material passports as a means to structure traceability. So here we can see one example from the construction sector. Please don't try and read those small prints. You probably won't be able to do that, but there are several things that we can see that they are proposing to bring to the material passport in the construction sector. It's including chemical information and different data. Also, in the food sector, there's a traceability proposal by the FDA in the US to enable rapid recalls. This picture is by the Boston Consulting Group, and it highlights also some other benefits besides the rapid recall from traceability. Includes the opportunity to build up a price premium to reduce CO2 emissions and also to enable fair trade. Another example is coming from the batteries value chain, and I think we're going to go deeper into this with the panel now. The EU initiative that's up on the table at the moment is proposing an electronic record for each individual battery in the market. On the right-hand side, the picture shows how the Global Battery Alliance has taken on to concretize the battery passport. There are also some practical pilots that are ongoing. So a group of companies is piloting a tracing solution for cobalt all the way from the mines through to electric cars. There's also an initiative by World Economic Forum. It's a project that is about accelerating sustainable production through digital traceability. I'm just quickly going to go forward here. So what are the benefits from traceability? So in one sentence, visibility upstream and downstream, and that'll enable us for a sustainable raw materials management. Also some new business models, such as a service business models or reuse or refurbish. And also it'll provide us with the means to verify sustainability claims. Further on, in addition to the improved supply chain performance, can we also get more out of the traceability system? So could we actually add some consumer use data, and can we that way further enable reuse business models? Could we actually learn to use the data and platforms also for circular design? In my opinion, this should be the ultimate goal. There are also some traceability barriers to traceability. So this is a study by the World Economic Forum, and also actually VTT with our colleagues, we have also carried out a study in digitalisation in different sectors and come to the same conclusion that there are some issues that relate to data quality, they relate to sharing practices, etc. I also want to highlight some other issues that have come up and that we need to figure out. So basically, who owns that data? Who owns the data space? Who makes the investments into the platforms? It will cost some money. What tools do we use, and who's going to run the show? Do we then actually know how to utilize the data to the maximum? And how do we ensure the access to data at a moderate cost and through the value chain with low entry barriers? I'm just here going to quickly wrap up and say that there are many considerations for any stakeholder building their traceability approach. So if you're a company implementing traceability, there are several things you need to look into. You have to figure out the technologies you want to use, if it includes using or building up some IoT solutions. You also need to figure out what your particular sustainability parameters are and how you're going to apply those. You need to figure out what kind of regulations are already out there, what kind of initiatives have the others made. You need to make sure that you have a communication channel and so forth. So many different things to take into account. In my opinion, technology is not an issue. We are working with technologies all the time, and I have a strong belief that we are going to manage that. However, what I'm thinking is that sharing the data, figuring out how to do that, building up the necessary connections and so forth, that is going to be something we have to work on. So it's a really complex entity for any stakeholder. And I think that the best way forward to address such complexity is to go through piloting. So we need to make trials, we need to be able to share what we learned, and then we need to improve from there. I'm also hoping that in the near future we can include user data to traceability and then extend traceability opportunities to circular design. I'm just quickly going to end here. VTT is working with multiple technologies relating to traceability, one of them being blockchains. And I will soon give the floor to the panel where we have my colleague, Dr. Kristiina Valtanen, who's working with these blockchain technologies. So we are all the time looking for collaborations and collaborators and great new ideas to try them out. So if you're interested, please connect with us. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your attention, and I hope to hear from you.
Thank you very much, INCA. Don't run away. I mean, I still need to pick your brains on a couple of things. So, you know, in all of this, which you were talking about, it just reminded me of a very interesting story, which one of my colleagues at VTT once told me. So, you know, she got a pair of jeans, really nice and fantastic. And after some years, she said, I'm going to share this with somebody. So, you know, she put it in a nice recycling center. And then she had made a decision that I will not buy new clothes again. Several years later, she goes and finds the same one at another recycling center. And she had known because there was some marking or something over there. So again, you know, it's not really traceable per se, but even knowing that this product was mine. And I'd just like to ask you one thing. I know that you have so many ideas and stuff over there, but we talk about product traceability. There is also material traceability. Now, where do you see that ownership? I mean, should manufacturers or material, you know, should they be the owners of these materials or products rather than us as the consumers? Because then, you know, we are buying that product as a service in a way, and then maybe they can track something.
Well, there are some great initiatives to that, and we are also developing these concepts where we could actually have material as a service, so that not necessarily the user will own it. And of course, there are some complications on the way, but I believe that there will be some cases where we can successfully apply that thinking. So material as a service, definitely yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you know, I'm not going to let you go so easily. I'd like to, Nani, can you come back on? I have, you know, a couple of words of questions to both of you now. You have been talking about different challenges and opportunities with regards to ICT and traceability. And Nani, I mean, you have wonderful stories. You do brilliant work all around. Tell us some of the great stuff, you know, you've been doing at Sitra and how you have actually helped companies to progress further from an idea to, let's say, profitable business.
Okay, yeah, thank you. We have published a playbook how to take circular economy business models in use in your businesses. And we are having a session of that after this session, so please continue there. And then we have published a list of the most inspiring circular economy businesses. And this list, it's like an example how to have business already in circular economy. And then, of course, we are researchers as well, or we work together with the researchers, and we have funded many projects. One ongoing project is how much do we use natural resources at the moment for the digitalization and new sustainable energy system. So it's really interesting because we need to make really happen that also from the material perspective, how to recycle more. At the moment, e-waste, we recycle only 17% of the materials in the end of life, so we are really losing valuable materials. And then, of course, education, which I already mentioned. Yeah.
But Nani, let me pick your brains a bit also on that. Are there any ideas you may have on how to, let's say, reduce this waste? I mean, of course, now you mentioned e-waste, but like, in Finland, we have this initiative that you cannot just throw away textile.
Yeah.
It's forbidden.
Yeah.
You can't do that. So, you naturally think about new ways to valorize this. Your thoughts?
Yeah. It's like INCA said, that it's material as a service, product as a service. That's one kind of circular economy business model, which is already used in many places. But we still need to think, because some of things we are still using natural resources, and we just have to make sure that we are not losing that anymore. So in the development phase of the materials, because we are using so complex and many kind of materials in this society, we need to think all of these again. How we are sure that it's staying in a use also after the first use. And that's, I think, it's the big and main thing at the moment, that we understand that we are living in a losing economy, and we can't do that anymore.
That's true.
Yeah.
INCA. Now, we both work at VTT. I like to call it the Technology and Innovation Powerhouse of Finland. So, and thank you to Sitra and others who've been funding us in different ways. But INCA, we do such wonderful stuff. So tell me something related to circular economy at VTT which excites you the most. I know there are many, but go ahead.
Can I just jump back?
Yes, of course.
To what she said. I think traceability is one of the ways to do this. I mean, you first need to make things visible before you can work on them, so that you know what you're working on, and you can also record your successes and see where you're going. So, but that's a quick comment to that. Well, as you know, we work in multiple fronts, but maybe just out of the blue, if I would need to pick out something that really accelerated me since a while, then I think we've been working on this carbon neutral concrete, where we actually utilize side streams, and in addition to that, we are in the process binding CO2 from the air into the product. So I think that's really cool, and we are piloting that, and we have actually invested in a piece of equipment to do the piloting, and there's also a startup that's about to be launched out from VTT. So I think that's pretty neat. As we know, construction and concrete is a major CO2.
Sure.
Yes,
of course.
I need to add
this is why it's important. Yes, we have this conversation.
Sorry, guys. It's your time to start a panel.
No, we have time. Don't worry.
Good. Because we have really nice and close collaboration with another team here in Sitra, data economy, and that's, like you said, it's really important to use the data for sustainable future, and that's why we here in Sitra, we work together with the data economy, fair data economy, carbon neutral circular economy. It's always economy and future and sustainable future. But yeah, data, digitalization, it definitely has a strong role in sustainable future.
And if I may, one more thing, I guess I already said it there, but I cannot say too many times. Circular design, that's so super important. So we need to understand how the whole system works, and then we need to be able to touch on the inefficiencies in the system, because those are the places where we can really do new business and create new innovation, and that I think is super important, and that's also based on data. So you need data to be able to do that.
Nani, I'm just going to still pick your brains a bit more, Why is it, in your opinion, that the moment we attach the word economy to something, suddenly, we get many people excited and on board? So, as an example, in Finland, we've been doing work on the bioeconomy for God knows how many years. It's come under different names, but the moment it got labeled as bioeconomy, it suddenly went into the national agenda and everything. And again, now, we talk about, let's say, circular economy. I mean, we have been doing work on circularity for a very long time. Research, and some companies are, of course, implementing solutions, but suddenly it grows. So, your thoughts on that?
I think this is the right moment now. And we have understood maybe the present situation worldwide, more or less. And we understand that it's in our hands to make decisions towards sustainability. But I have to say at the same time that for me, it seems that we have puzzle. We have part here, part here, part here. But we need to connect everything we know, every solution, and we need to understand that this is so complex world and everything is connected, that it's not enough that we have solution in maybe in construction industry, concrete or textile or ICT. But we need to understand that these need to also work together. Yeah. And what is the wholeness we are targeting? And of course we have different countries, different kind of legislation and policies. And that's why it's also really important to have this kind of network where we can share everything we know, experiences, and also start something new together. Like INCA invited you to join this work, and I invited you to join this. We need all of our brains here when we create sustainable future.
I think that is very important because, again, you've used this word twice just now, and it's our. It's not mine, it's not yours, it's ours. Yeah. And when we combine these brilliant minds, magic naturally happens. And to close, INCA, maybe you can give us a few words on this wonderful innovators community which you're in charge of and developing, this ecosystem.
Yes, again, I'm inviting everybody to attend. We are starting from the system views and trying to figure out what kind of exact solutions we need to respond to these systemic challenges. And for that, we have developed some methodologies, how to bring together some practical things for circular design in different areas and sectors. And also continuing from there, we want to co-innovate together with you guys. So as said, super important to work together, and everything affects everything. So none of us can work on their own. So if you got interested, please go and check out circinnovation.com. We have some more stuff ongoing there.
And before I let these lovely colleagues of mine step out for a while, let's just have a virtual round of applause for their wonderful talks and experiences. Thank you, Nani. Thank you.
Thanks, Sami.
Thank you very much. And we'll be getting you back a bit later on. It's now my pleasure and joy to introduce you to our wonderful panel today. We have persons from, like I said earlier on, from policy, from industry, from funding to research. So let me welcome, for example, first of all, Peter Borke. He's at the OECD. He's been doing a lot of work for quite a while on plastics, microeconomic aspects of the circular economy and transition. I think, Peter, you've been there for 20 plus years now. So welcome on board. At the same time, so Peter, I put on the policy side. Let me also introduce Jani Kiuru. He is a CTO at the Finnish Minerals Group, and Jani has more than 20 years of experience in industrial waste management, process diagnostics, investment projects, and the best part is that he has a very nice critical viewpoint on things, but again, to lead to certain forms of tangible impact. Let me also introduce Jaana Sinipuro, who's a leading ICT professional and specialist at Sitra, where we're here today. And she likes to explore the future of how to use the concept of twin transition and digital twins to combine, let's say, digital transformation and sustainability. So, of course, we hear that word a lot. So, welcome on board, Jaana. And then last but not least, it's my pleasure and joy to invite my colleague, Kristiina Valtanen, who's a researcher at VTT. And Kristiina actually has a very interesting background. So she studies blockchain, IoT, AI and all of these fancy stuff. And then she's actually an avid gardener, I found out. So then she gets inspired by nature and sees how we can apply and leverage some of nature's natural, let's say, processes and everything to do something better for mankind through, of course, blockchain, IoT, and everything. So welcome on board, everybody, and let me just start picking some questions for you. So, Jani, let me start off with you. Why do we need traceability?
I could use all the time here because
I mean not too much, but why
but,
traceability? Because if I look at your background and everything, yes.
Yeah, kind of at least where we are working on in the raw material space, and we are doing everything to carry out activities sustainably and responsibly, but without traceability, there is no way that kind of work would have financial value as we cannot prove anything. So traceability is as a tool to provide this information all the way to the final customers of the raw materials. It goes through a huge set of processes, supply chain, and that information needs to be available for the final customers. So that's kind of one quite straightforward need for it. Of course, there are others related to process efficiency and then related to the follow-up of the regulation and standards and so on. But kind of an economic approach is that.
Jani, would you, by any chance, let's say, happen to have any concrete example you'd like to share?
Of course, INCA already mentioned that in the other fields of industry, food, textile, there are a lot of examples that how this been applied. But in the mineral area, not so much. There are some exercises with the conflict minerals, but I guess that one good example is with LME, which is they are trading raw materials, and they are trading also our materials into the battery value chain. And they announced a few years ago that they will trade cobalt with 2 different prices. Well, that was delayed a bit, but I hope that it initiative is still alive and it will come someplace. That, of course, the one reason why it's been delayed might be because there is no traceability available yet.
Jani, again, a bit on traceability. I mean, how do you see the business benefits or advantages of traceability from a financial side? I mean, when can we actually see something start to happen?
Yeah. Of course, I could throw this to the policymakers also, but we are quite looking forward to EU regulation, of course, and hoping that it will also cover the imported materials. And of course, now when we are looking, for instance, the OEMs and their claims to usage of raw materials and various sustainability indicators attached to those, mostly CO2 footprint. So we expect that we are now having the lowest nickel CO2 footprint for nickel production globally. We expect that would have some sort of a value, and yeah, to apply that value into supply chain, it's easier to take it there and apply it when we have some traceability tools available.
Yeah. Christina, let me pick your brains now a bit, coming from the research side and everything. Where do you see the current technological traceability solutions? I mean, where do they stand today?
Yeah, hello everyone. I thought this question quite a long time, and I think, at least from my perspective, the thing is that many technological building blocks for implementing traceability are already in place. And also advanced traceability is in everyday use in many industries and value chains. We also have many existing standards and data models to facilitate the traceability. But however, in many cases, the traceability today still has been built to serve primarily the linear business models, the linear efficiency, and also linear cost savings. So I think that because we are also today talking about the traceability for circularity purposes, we should be able now to increase the level of transparency over these traditional business processes, value chains, and business ecosystems. So create kind of bigger ecosystems and also cooperation between existing ecosystems. Technologically, there is a clear need for technologies and also data infrastructures that can provide neutral platforms and also level playing fields, as well as transparency. There I can see from my point of view these decentralized technologies, distributed ledgers, blockchains, and so on as an interesting possibility to build these kind of technologies. I also see that that industries have already made many blockchain-related pilots and demonstrations, even in production level. So things are maturing very much. But maybe also, as INCA already mentioned, that generally the technology is not an issue if we are thinking about traceability, and I also agree completely with that. The main issue from my point of view also is that how we can create profitable circular economy business so that it really takes into account limited natural resources and harm caused to the environment. That's the main issue.
Thank you, Christina. And Jana, if I may come to you, because your enthusiasm with the transition and data and everything. So how do we ensure the availability of data, its integrity, and of course, I would say responsibility and ownership? What are your views on that?
Yeah, I agree with previous speakers that it's not so much about technology. And I think there are several analysts like Gartner who say that we are moving from closed ecosystems to more network models and business models and towards open ecosystems. So basically, I think that we will see circularity in those business models and data economy as well, more responsible use of data and organizations focusing on sharing data. But in order to make that happen, we need to have trust ensuring mechanisms in place, because you can't really share your own data with your value chain or your partners if you don't rely on their businesses. So that's a level of systemic change we need. And I think it starts with technology, and there are many technical components and technologies already in place. But then it comes to the data related topics as well, interoperability, even the way how you use and how you do coding affects on your impact on
Sure.
environmental ICT impact. So these are complex questions. And then it comes to the culture, learnings and organizational culture, people, how they treat, how they think about data, are there data strategies in place, and how are your data governance models? So it's like shared risk taking, and it's more like mental attitudes. And you need to work at multiple levels in organization if you want to build this good circle for trust needed to make data to circulate and to be able to be transparent in both in your production but also in your data practices. So what we would like to do is to introduce this new concept of responsible use of data. Basically, we were talking about price premiums and fair trade examples. Why not introduce this topic also to data sharing practices and label it like fair data practices being part of the corporate social responsibility?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, some things which touched me a lot, of course, one was the openness of data. And then at the same time, you have this trust. And somehow they do go hand in hand, because we do have certain societies which talk so much about open data, and it's not a problem to make data available for everybody. But naturally, this is a given subset. And of course, now in Europe, we have the GDPR, which helps protect citizens in a certain way. But how do you think we can get towards a more open data sharing world where you trust the system to be responsible enough in how your data is used?
Well, fortunately, there's lots of support from the EU Commission in creating these Green Deal data spaces and data spaces for different verticals where the data sharing is the, necessity. But what we see as very important complement to the regulation is this soft infrastructure. So common rules and guidelines, data sharing rule books on how you, inside your ecosystem, are willing to share data. So what kind of rules you're all apply to, like soft regulation, self-regulation, agreeing on the rules, how you can promote your ecosystem to be more fair than competing ones. So I think that's one layer where we should combine our forces and talk with common concepts and agree how we will develop this soft infrastructure needed for interoperability.
Yeah, thank you. Peter, if I may come to you, you've been working with data and policies for a very long time, and we have had, of course, challenges in the implementation of circular economy solutions. So what are your thoughts on how, let's say, has digitalization helped partly towards this transition to a circular economy? And have there been any market failures or something which has triggered this?
Thank you. Thank you for the question and for taking us also a step back, because, what we have done at the OECD is that we have really also thought from an economist's point of view, how do digital technologies actually help in this circular economy transition? And for that reason, we have applied the so-called market failures concept, which is really economists' jargon. Market failures are really obstacles that prevent markets from operating efficiently and allocating goods and services efficiently. And so the most well-known market failure is basically that of public goods, such as clean air, clean water, which are not priced in markets. But there are other market failures, such as imperfect information, transaction costs, consumption externalities, that can be directly addressed by digital technologies. So let me just take two examples. One is that of imperfect information. So imperfect information is basically a problem because it means economic actors will make suboptimal decisions because they're not fully informed. And so, you were just discussing, of course, traceability, the use of material passports. These are, instruments or measures that can help to alleviate these inefficiencies in the market. Similarly, transaction costs. So transaction costs, which are related to finding and bargaining with customers and suppliers, they typically slow down adoption of new technologies, of new business models. And digital technologies can essentially help to lower these costs and therefore speed up adoption rates. So, this is sort of the lens that we have used, and we'll be publishing a report on that very shortly. And I hope I will get an opportunity to say a few things also around the policy applications that we are discussing for digital technologies in the circular economy.
But I mean, you just touched a very relevant point. So let's hear about, because I was just about to even come to that. So, where is policy headed? What is being done when we talk about data and traceability?
Well, I mean, I think we are still at early stages in this endeavor. You've already heard from I think Jana was mentioning what's happening at the EU level, these Green Deal data spaces, safe data spaces, etc. More generally, I think what is needed, and what we'll also be saying in our report, is that you need a set of more general policies that ensure that some of the systemic risks which are linked to policies around data governance, access to data, digital security, balancing privacy with openness. These policies, which are not just relevant for the circular economy, but relevant for the digital economy in a way, in a more general way, they need to be addressed. That's sort of a precondition. But then we need support for research and development, that help to apply existing technologies to circular economy challenges. The topic of standards and harmonized data protocols, that was also brought up. So governments and policy can play a role in providing the frameworks for that. And maybe, and I won't give the full list, we have much more that we're talking about, but I think the other real challenge, and this also came up in some of the speakers, is that digital technologies applied for the circular economy can also produce unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And they will also need to be addressed. Oftentimes digital technologies can make things cheaper for people, which means they have additional income to spend on potentially harmfully environmentally harmful goods and services. And then it's up to policy to make sure that doesn't happen, so to avoid this rebound effect, as we say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Jani, let me get back to you again. You have a big say and know-how of the industry. So what type of data, let's say, if I talk about material data, would you like to have? And what type of data, or what data would you as a company, for example, or if you're a company, be willing to share?
Of course, now when we're looking at what kind of a criteria will be in place when comparing the production chains, supply chain, and how they end up into EVs finally, it's quite clear that CO2 footprint is quite obvious. There are already demonstrations or traces around that. Probably you can come up with the quite relevant indicators from these EU policies or proposals as well, like the amount of recycled material in the products. Of course, the social indicators are important. I'm not an expert there, but for sure it's a benefit for EU-based production, and also and other environmental indicators, such as the consumption of fresh water or any emissions or discharges coming from the processes. So that type of indicators should be applied, and that's all, and that most likely will be applied. And I'm quite sure that there is not much problem for, at least for the companies who are trying to gain benefit out of this to provide the data. Of course, and then it's a question that can everyone provide the data? Otherwise, it's not fair, because it's we're now focusing on discussing about the openness and data security and IT systems, and that's, as Jana said, that's quite straightforward, easy to do. But and Peter said that there might be savings and so on, but someone will pay the bill, and it seems that it will be the industry, because we need to put together the systems, transfer the data, build the indicators, follow up mechanisms, and there's a huge amount of task to do, and it will cost much. It's not just an IT. We need to convince our supply chain to and sourcing to commit into these targets. Our customers need to be aligned, and not to forget, of course, the IT system. And then if we can trust no one, so there needs to be some sort of standards, probably audits. Someone will do those. They tend to be quite expensive, so there are costs as well.
Jana, if I may get back to you, again, picking up from what Jani was just talking about, how can, let's say, an organization like Sitra potentially, or others around in your ecosystem, help industry to actually build such systems? And then I'd even like to ask you, how can we enrich this data to make more meaningful sense for policymakers and businesses?
Well, first of all, I really like the idea, and I think we should combine the forces and push that little further, the sandboxes, the trials and pilots, showcasing how we can go further. That also eliminates the risk and maybe makes the business environment for companies a little bit more predictable, when the decision makers and authorities can ensure that these trials actually work in practice, and there's legal safety in making those novel innovations. So I think that's one approach where policymakers and regulators and society could help businesses. But then also making all this data relevant to individuals, like end consumers, end users. It really starts to make sense, because you identify yourself as a tribe member. You have your own personal preferences.
True.
So how we can put this personal flavor into the statistical data, register data, and company data, and create more innovative services, digital services that are more relevant, like making information more relevant for different users. And I'm also thinking that there's interesting initiative happening across Europe called Gaia X, where, for instance, and Katina X, where German automobile industries aligning the forces and joining forces for near real-time data processing and creating these data spaces. If we could enrich that thinking, that at the same time, while they are maybe focusing more on this traditional supply chain measures, they would take this traceability on that should be part of that solution, and merging these different views together. I think we might win time, and we really need to act fast, otherwise we will lose this opportunity.
Peter, if I may, come back to you, how do you believe digital solutions and the data they're generating help in policy making? And again, I know it's almost like a chicken and egg question that, do we make policy based on the availability of data? And what if this data amount increases, or, does policy drive it, or does data drive it? But how do you believe, the overload of data which we have at the moment and different analytic solutions, how are they helping you in long-term policy making?
Thank you, Sami. Yes, we've been looking at this, and we really find that there are very significant opportunities to improve policy making, linked to digitalization and maybe the introduction of traceability or tracing instruments. More generally, and that's really at all levels. So both in policy data and analysis. Of course, the availability of increasing amounts of data, allows you to monitor things much better and to come up with more, precise policy analysis. Just to give one example, I think this is in Sweden, where the Environmental Protection Agency is monitoring the energy consumption of household appliances sort of directly through IoT or other means, and this of course allows to go beyond what's stated in what producers say. The same is true for the design of policies. You can come up with entirely new policy instruments that weren't possible before. Now, this is not linked to traceability necessarily, but just think of intelligent waste bins that actually, know who put how much, and then you can basically price and bill, households very precisely for the amount of waste that they produce. And finally, there's a huge potential in helping policy implementation. So this is on the enforcement and compliance side. You can just monitor things much better, as I said already before. A lot of countries are now using tracing technologies, to trace hazardous waste and to make sure that it doesn't get lost. And I think this was also already mentioned. Of course, there are increasing environmental claims being put on products and services, and with this data, these claims can now be much better policed than before. So let me just stop there.
Yeah. Christina, let me come back to you. I mean, we've talked a lot about traceability and data and the huge amounts of data. So my question to you is that how can we minimize the negative impacts of increasing data and its usage? Because naturally, the more data we get, we consume more energy.
Yeah, true. And as it was already mentioned here today, that it's quite difficult to assess and measure the impact of ICT and data use as such, because in many cases the environmental effects are indirect. So there can be positive and negative impact, and it's difficult to see all these pieces. Of course, it's clear that the biggest negative direct climate and environmental impacts of these ICT technologies and data use are related to materials and energy consumption. It is estimated that by 2030 we would use even 1/5 of our total electricity for ICT and data, and it's very much. But on the other hand, of course, the use of renewables could be one solution to this, and also I think the wise use of waste heat as a part of district heating or so on. There are studies that show that we can save or recover almost 97% of the energy if we can use this waste heat wisely. But maybe in a bigger picture, I think that it would be very important that those people that are really making the decisions on digital infrastructure, the hardware procurement, the software design, and who are managing all these ICT systems and and so on, they could have a better visibility into the actual energy consumption caused by their decision. Because at the moment the case is not. So we will need a clearer reporting of this energy consumption of hardware, software, and so on.
Very quickly now, question to all of you. So first Peter, then Jana, then Jani, and finally Christina. What is your vision for the future of traceability, and what steps do we need to take now? So, Peter.
Thank you, Sami. Well, I think the big challenge here is, and I think this came out very nicely from the panel discussion, is one of scaling up now, because the technologies are there. It's all feasible. There are still obstacles, many of them essentially linked to governance. But the scale up is what's needed, and I think if I may just take the perspective of policy of policy making and also the applications of these technologies at that particular end, I think we have a real opportunity here to reduce things such as waste crime, illegal trade in waste, to levels much below what we have currently, and we know from various reports from Interpol and elsewhere that there's a lot of that going on. Here we have a window of opportunity to apply those technologies to suppress at least significant portion of that.
Jana.
Yeah, I wish to see this being an integrated part of corporate social responsibility reporting, and also consumers putting a little bit more pressure on us as the experts and policymakers, having dialogue and developing.
That's good. Yes, we'll do that.
Making it happen.
Jani.
I would have more info within a few months when our first demonstration is over, but kind of I would be happy if all the batteries sold or produced in EU would at least contain the origin information of the raw materials. That's even difficult enough. Then we can figure out what to do next after that happens.
But that's wonderful, and hope to hear from you, in a couple of months' time about the progress and stuff. Christina.
Yeah, for me, I think it's important to incentivize the ordinary citizens and people to do things in order to get this economics of scale. It's important, and there I see that decentralized technologies and IoT could be used.
Very good. So I'm going to take a pause and rush out, but you've sent in some wonderful questions, and let me get my colleague INCA on board to pose these to the wonderful panelists. INCA.
Thanks. I'll be assisting Sami here. Okay, so we have questions from the chat. Jani, how can we realize the added value of traceability in monetary terms?
Well, I hope that the public claims that OEM are saying are true. If they are, they should be willing to pay more if the indicators they claim to be important are really important for their customers as well. So that value then comes through the offtake agreements.
Okay, so through the product line.
Yeah, of course, some of the kind of end users secure their raw material supply directly. Others cover it through the supply chain, but in a way that's not hindering the mechanism of the value going through the supply chain.
Thanks. Then there's another question for Christina. So how is it taken into consideration that the data changes? Products are upgraded, repaired, Power options may change. So how to keep data updated but without massive updating resources? So I guess it's a matter of efficiency, right?
Yeah, I think, there are many things, and the cost of doing this all upgrading things it's important. Also, I think here we haven't much discussed yet this data quality as such. I think this question is also related to that we have to be able to improve the data quality in general and as a whole, and also try to incentivize the stakeholders to produce the quality data so that we can trust that the data is up to date.
You actually mentioned this just before as well. So do you have any concrete ideas how to do that?
I see one development path in these digital infrastructures, and I'm talking about these decentralized identifiers and self-sovereign identity concepts that enable us to also build business on data quality, because using these kind of identifiers and verifiable claims related to those, we can enable the assessment of reliability of data and, for example, the reputation of suppliers.
Great, thank you. There's another question from the audience to Peter. So how does today's discussion relate to the developing world, where the challenges with digitalization are at different stages?
That's a very good question. I don't have like a direct answer, but I think I have an indirect one, because one thing that we've been thinking around is, what are some of the economic risks that increasing digitalization and requirements such as traceability of materials and substances through value chains bring with them for small and medium-sized enterprises. And I think Jani was making the point about the costs quite strongly. All of this costs money. All of this costs capability and skills that need to be developed in companies. So this doesn't come for free. And one risk that we see is, where the circular economy is really also about, closing loops, locally and procuring more locally and having, sort of small local or regional loops. Digitalization really gives an edge to large corporations that operate globally and that can, achieve scale and offset these costs more easily. So I assume, coming back to the initial question, that there is a risk also that this plays out to the economic disadvantage of companies and businesses in the developing world that may not be quite as ready and not able to afford to put these technologies in place and ultimately lose market access in developed countries.
So that's a complicated issue for sure. There's a question next for Jana. So what types of businesses are more drawn to transparency and data sharing? Public more than private?
Well, for public companies, I think there's a push, and that's more natural. But then again, when I'm thinking about more network business models, I think private companies agreeing on these common rules and transparency might win a lot by combining forces and creating that's a little bit more flexible world also in creating the transparency and agreeing on this, what I call as a soft infrastructure, common rules and these common data sharing agreements, self-regulation part.
Right. Then we have a question for Jani and all. So if you want to start with this one, Jani, and then the rest can also pitch in. So would the industry be willing to share data on chemicals used, especially chemicals of concern? What do you say, Jani?
I think we already do. The main chemical consumptions are listed in the annual reporting, and that's part of the reporting already. So yes, of course. Then it's in a traceability issue is that where the chemicals are sourced and what are the kind of implications of the chemical production and so on, and there should also be visibility to that, and it's a bit more complex issue, of course, than when it comes down to the agreements of the chemicals and so on, but of course we're willing to work on that.
Yeah, it's probably walking a thin line also in terms of whether you can give out some information from your supply chain and, like you said, the agreements with them. What about, does anybody else want to take this on? Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, just to say maybe that when it comes to more detailed information about chemical substances that are contained in materials or products, there can be a conflict with intellectual property and confidential business information, basically, especially if you go as far as requiring also to provide quantities, because then ultimately companies might be forced to unveil their recipes. And so I think there is a bit of a tension there, that may pose an obstacle to going very far down, into the detail.
Yes, this is difficult for sure. Well, if we go to a question to everybody then, talking of pilots for traceability and data spaces, which pilots are we collectively aware of and could learn from? Do you have any great examples of some pilots ongoing? Jani, at least you mentioned something.
Yeah, I can start. We announced a few months ago our partnership with IT supplier Circular, which is developing traceability as a service, and we have ongoing pilots to trace carbon footprint from our production. That pilot has not been announced as such, but we'll report it when it's finished within a few months. And of course, there are Circular is carrying out several other pilots with their customers, which are already publicly announced as well. And then of course we can read news about resources. One of the exercises driven by Kruha, which is an IT supplier. There are companies involved there. And then the responsible sourcing blockchain network is one of the exercises where RCS Global is carrying out pilots and audits in the production sites. So, and then of course not to forget the battery passport and LME passport as well. But those are mostly platform for traceability rather than tools for actual tracing. But yeah, there are a lot of examples and projects ongoing.
How about Jan? I know that you have something going on with digitalization and data.
Yeah, we've run several pilots on this decentralized technology at our testbed. But just to mention one which concept that's quite interesting is this kind of smart ship concept where we tried. There's so many different views that you can use the data for. So if you think about ship constructors, if you think about ships in traffic. You can use, if you plan the ship accurately, you can use the same sets of data for different purposes, like supply chain optimization, environmental impacts, but also cross-selling, upselling, evacuation plans on the ship. So that was just a quick example. If you bring different stakeholders together and start thinking since the very beginning what purposes you need data for, and then you start like designing your products, or in this case, a network of products in certain way. You start in the design phase and think about data, the potential of data and IoT, then you really can create these different viewpoints on the data and use it for different purposes. And I think that was one of the most interesting pilots we've had in the past.
You should definitely look that up. Yes. Yeah. Sounds great. I'm looking at Sami now because I know that we're sort of running out of time. But do we have time to finish this round?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Please do.
Well, then, Kristina, go ahead if you have something in mind.
Yeah, the first example that came to my mind relating to blockchain pilots, I think, is in energy sector, where already there are production level examples of, for example, this proof of origin experiments, that how we can provide the proof of origins for renewable energy. I think we can learn many things also to other sectors from energy side.
Thank you. And Peter, do you want to go still, or do you have something in mind?
Very briefly, yes, of course. I mean, when you ask about pilot projects, cool ones, I think everybody has something to say. No, just one from the policy side, maybe, or more from the public authority side. What's being done by the Dutch Infrastructure Authority is that they are developing, data sets that would allow them to reuse entire pieces of road infrastructure, such as bridges. And they would have these passports basically that go in detail about what it's made of, and what it measures, etc. And then find opportunities for entire pieces of infrastructure like that, that weigh thousands of tons to be used elsewhere, when they become obsolete in the place where they are used. And there are lots of examples like that, things that you would think are completely impossible that all of a sudden become possible thanks to those digital applications.
That is really inspiring. I'd like to thank our panelists for answering this extra question as well, and then Sami.
Yes, INCA, please hang in over there. Nani, you're somewhere, please do come up. It's been a pleasure to host this wonderful session for you. We have learned a lot about the circular economy, the role of digitalization, of course traceability, and most importantly about how we together, not just you or me, can actually make a difference. So I'd like to take this opportunity to, of course, thank our wonderful keynote speakers and our wonderful panelists, but at the same time we have a wonderful team from Sitra who's helped put all of this in together. So please walk through, we'd love to, and please a virtual, let's say, shake up for them. They've been doing this wonderful job. And before we leave, I mean, if we were in person, so we'd shake hands, so virtual handshake to all of you. And I think the key message I'd like to really end with today is that please be safe, be happy, and let's work together to build a world which we will be proud of to leave behind for future generations. And I'm sure together we can actually make this happen. Thank you very much and goodbye.